Good evening, everyone, dear colleagues and our guests and also friends. We are more than happy to welcome you for the second edition of the EduCafé of 2026. Maybe some of you already know me. My name is Hladečková and I'm head of Czech License Office for Education and Research here in Brussels, which is part of the Czech National Agency for International Education and Research. Today, I'm more than happy that actually we are not the only one organizing this event, but also Erasmus Student Network, which is partner of this event. However, when we speak about the higher education, we often think about learning, academic excellence, future careers, and research. When we speak about student mobility, we tend to think about learning new languages, building new friendships, and discovering new cultures, of course. At the same time, these experiences also bring significant challenges. Academic pressure, stress, and the demands of adapting to a new environment and life balance can become emotionally heavy. Students may face uncertainty, pressure to succeed, or even loneliness. So, today's discussion will also invite us to think about students dealing with anxiety, depression, ADHD, autism spectrum conditions, or other invisible challenges. The variety of experiences and individuals can remind us that support must be approachable, clearly communicated, and of course connected to students' real lives. This is why today's discussion is really, really important. Student well-being is not only about the mental strength of an individual, but also about the supportive environment and communities. To guide this discussion, we are joined by the distinguished speakers who bring different perspectives on the topic. We, of course, look forward to their insights and later on to a discussion with all of you. Moderating tonight's discussion is Kaja Kaczkiełło, our colleague from the Erasmus Student Network. So, without any further ado, Kaja, the floor is yours, and I hope that all of you enjoy the evening.
Thank you so much, Lenka, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So, my name is Kaja. I am the Vice President of the Erasmus Student Network, and I'm here joined by Stanislav, Charlotte, and Irena. And we are going to dive a bit more into the topic of students' mental health and well-being. Myself, I work a lot with volunteers that are students. And as an organization, we also support student mobility. And as Lenka mentioned, this is also a period in which they experience some difficulties and challenges. I'm very happy that we are tackling this topic. Not happy that it exists as a challenge, but happy that we are bringing this as a conversation. That mental health is no longer a niche conversation in higher education, but it became central to how we think about student success, participation, and inclusion. We see that universities are investing in well-being support, but there is also still a question on how do we ensure that students actually have services that they can access and ask for their needs to be answered. Student well-being is not only about crisis response, it is also about whether students feel like they belong, that they feel represented, they feel safe asking for help, and that they feel seen beyond academic performance. And as I mentioned, in mobility and international experiences, those can be deeply enriching, but they can also amplify stress, loneliness, and the challenges that already exist. There are also students that experience difficulties silently, especially students with invisible disabilities, and the institutions do not always recognize this as a challenge. So one of the challenges that we will tackle and that we will discuss is that it's not only about creating these support services, but how they become accessible to students. So we will start with the panel. We will go through different aspects, but there will also be a part when we will ask for your questions, reflections, and comments. But firstly, before we begin the discussion, I would like to ask all of you to present yourself briefly. Where do you come from? What do you do? And also what kind of experiences you wish to bring today. So maybe we can start with Irena. And I don't know if this will be also.
So hello everybody, my name is Irena and I am a student advisor for students with special needs at University Králové. I am in charge of also Erasmus students with special needs, which is a new cooperation we have started last year, as I remember well. So in case some student with special needs comes from abroad as a Erasmus students, I will be the one who is talking with the Department of Foreign Studies and ensure that he has all the support he needs. I am also in charge of tutors, which are, who are the people at our university who help deliver the support to the teachers and other people who are responsible for this support.
Hello? No? Okay, so this one is not working.
Hello. Now you can hear me. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Charlotte. I'm from Belgium. I live in Ghent. I come from Brussels and I work in Bruges. Wow. I'm the student welfare officer at the College of Europe. My role at the College of Europe is actually quite broad, so I'll try to be brief. Mainly, my main role is that I'm the first point that students can go to if they have any health-related concerns. It can be mental health, can be physical health. Also something, maybe you know the College of Europe, but the College of Europe is a very international institution. We have 340 students with over 30 nationalities. So it's a very intercultural environment. It's also a one-year residential program. So students live, eat, study, do their lives together for 10 months. So it can be quite an intense experience with a lot of academic pressure. So I'm the person that they can turn to. I'm not a psychologist or a clinical psychologist. My door is basically always open. Students can just walk in and have a conversation with me. I'm also the one coordinating workshops, psychoeducational workshops. I also teach yoga classes. I teach meditation sessions, so really low threshold care, first line advice. But I also forward to more professional care like psychologists, specialists, doctors, psychiatrists. But since, there are a lot of international students who've never been to Belgium, so it's good that they have a person that they can turn to. And I'm also partially in charge of diversity and inclusion related efforts that we do at the college. So very broad. Also proud alumna of ESN. I did my Erasmus in Norway, so I was participating in activities, and I was also part of the board of ESN when I was living in Spain. So I was organizing activities for Erasmus students, so that was really fun. Perspectives that I'd like to bring. Maybe, this unique setting that I work in, so this residential program where there's a big community sense, but that comes with challenges, but also opportunities. Because we're very close to our students as well. A little bit like that. Thank you.
So, hello everyone, my name is Stan, and those of you well versed in Czech language might have noticed that my surname means small snack, whereas Irene's surname means small hunger. So whether this was done on purpose by organizers to create some sort of dynamic on a panel, I don't know. Whether it will happen, I don't know, but anyway. I work as a psychologist at Masaryk University, which basically means I'm available for students for individual consultations. Past couple of years, we've been offering group sessions, group therapies, so that's also something that puts some different perspective and new enthusiasm to my work. My focus is not that broad, it's mainly those individual consultations every week, but since each and every student is different, then I'm not bored by my job at all. So I hope to bring some sort of perspective, maybe anecdotal, maybe some thoughts of mine. I will try to support them with some data, but mainly some perspective from my job as a counselor and psychologist for students.
Thank you so much. So now, about the snacks, we will have some. But we will start a bit with the reality of the students and the topic of mental health currently. So starting with why it matters now, also what kind of maybe trends we are seeing and how it changed over the years. I would like to ask first, Charlotte, from your work working directly with the students, what changes have you noticed in how students speak about well-being and support today compared to a few years ago?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I noticed that the term well-being and terms that go around well-being are more fluently and frequently used. Like, for example, words such as anxiety or depression, panic attacks, neurodiversity. I feel like they come up way more often than a few years ago. I also feel like there's less stigma around asking for help. So I feel, currently students they feel more okay to ask for help if they're struggling, or to allow help if it's offered to them. Maybe that has also changed. I do notice that there's still some hesitation to asking for help or allowing help. So that's also something that I still notice, even though it is better. Because people are really advocating for it, also from the students, so not just institutions, but really students advocating for mental health and bringing awareness to this topic. But there is indeed still this hesitation, and I also notice in this intercultural environment that it also really depends on how you were raised, where you come from as well. So there's also this intercultural difference that I notice when it comes to talking about mental health or asking help. But at the same time, or simultaneously, I also notice that there is this currently this need to perform and be high functioning really well, even though sometimes you are struggling. And I think that comes also, maybe my perspective is like when you live in this closed residential program, you feel like you see all those people around you, like high achieving and looking like they're not struggling. And I think, sorry, there's something in my throat and it's throwing me off. So I think, this comparison sometimes that students make with their peers can sometimes be like, oh, they're not struggling, so I shouldn't struggle either, or I shouldn't ask for help. So I also feel like that's more common now, and I think that maybe also comes with social media, that they see the snapshot of someone's life, like, oh, I achieved this, or I presented this, or and so they see the snapshot of a high of someone's life, and then they compare it with themselves, and then they tend to think maybe more oh, I also shouldn't be struggling, or because that person isn't, but that doesn't really represent how that person is actually doing. And so I feel like comparison can then also sometimes currently lead to imposter syndrome. That's also something that is very hot currently. I feel like imposter syndrome is where you feel like kind of a fraud, even though there's evidence of that you really striving and doing really well, but that they just have a feeling of oh, I don't feel like I don't belong, basically. And I think that also comes with this comparison through social media or through peers around you. I feel like there's a lot talked about, but at the same time, I have this, I see this we still have to be high performing and maybe, not showing that you can struggle. That's my take.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we do definitely see a trend of it being a bit more spoken about. We are having this panel. The institutions are definitely recognizing this as a struggle and as a topic to continue exploring and to make more safe spaces for students to express their needs. And when it comes to their needs and realities, Stanislav, you work every day with students and you have consultations with them. What kind of challenges do you notice that they bring into your consultations? What are they struggling with?
Yeah, I'm going to join Charlotte with this one, because my subjective assessment of the students that are visiting me is that 2/3 of the students that visit me mentions anxiety or stress. That would be the two biggest categories. Of course, it is more heterogeneous than this, but in a nutshell, during the first session, when I ask what brings you here, what would you like to discuss, that would be the biggest hits currently. And I mean, obviously, when we present and when we communicate our service to students, this is something that we aim for, right? Our brochures and newsletters contain like, do you have problems with stress, do you have problems with anxiety? So logically they maybe think this service is more for them, so it might be this pre-selection sort of nuance that I'm seeing. At the same time, I think it is common among people, and from my point of view, it can be something very meaningful. Like, I'm really handling some sort of stress and some sort of anxiety, but sometimes it can be this umbrella label for many things. During the first session, when I'm asking people, what does it mean? What's the stress about? What's the anxiety about? It becomes more, it shows that it's a bigger cluster. It's not one thing that causes everything, but it's the weird, unnamed feeling that I'm feeling because I have many other sensations, many other activities. So I'm a little bit careful about jumping like, yes, this is anxiety, you need antidepressant, anxiolytics, but I like to ask, what does it mean for that person? And we know from research that when emotions become more pinpointed, like emotions really like specifics, right? If it's like, I'm feeling weird, I'm feeling bad, it's not good. When I'm able to pinpoint it, I'm nervous because of a presentation, let's say, about the deadline, it becomes more clear, like, what are we dealing with? And maybe even the emotions become less acute and less stressful. So yeah, those are the big categories, but also I wouldn't really stop asking at that point. I would begin asking at that point what's going on in their lives.
Thank you. So we know that the topic is a bit more open now, also the challenges that students face, but there are still some barriers to accessibility. And in Irena, you work around accessibility and inclusion. So I wanted to ask, what kind of barriers do you notice that students with psychological or also invisible difficulties still face in this topic?
I would like to continue in your thoughts, because I have this topic divided into two parts. First part is according to my direct experience, and second part is according to our conducted survey, which our university conducted in 2022 on the topic of barriers and inclusion. From my personal experience, you are right that students really feel overwhelmed when they start at university, and usually they feel that there is nobody who could support them, because suddenly they are on their own. There's lots of new information, lots of requests, lots of demands, and also lots of expectations. And many students fear that they will be stigmatized, rejected by classmates, or misunderstood by teachers if they admit that they need help. So even though we try to distribute the information about our services in the beginning of the first year, I feel that this information is just one of many at the beginning. So they just don't know what to expect, and they don't maybe know that they need our help. So then later on, when they need help, they feel that they don't have the access, because they don't know where to find us. They don't have the information. And because sometimes they have the problem to communicate their needs, they are not able to find out themselves or ask to their peers. Also, my tutors agree with me that the students lack of many social skills from the high school. That means that those who have the psychological or invisible difficulties usually feel stronger that they are not able to communicate their needs, and they are not supported by their peers as much as, for example, I know from my own studies, because this is different times and students are more on their online world than in real world. And this is partially confirmed by our survey, because the main barrier is insufficient communication between students and teachers, and especially if the students suffer from some kind of communication difficulty and they feel that the teachers may judge them, because the fear of judgment or that it will influence their score at the end of the semester is one of the big barriers, I would say. And also teachers are overwhelmed. So they need to be motivated, for example, by financial stipulation to work with students because they have loads on their shoulders. So it's difficult to find the time for them. And also the information barrier, especially in the time of crisis, that it happens many times that when the students need the most, they don't find a way how to find help.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we can admit that the service and the support exists, but there are still many barriers or challenges, and there is still a bit of stigma around it. So universities, they do describe themselves as inclusive, and they try to create a safe environment, but students still experience this feelings of loneliness, exclusion, the anxiety, the stress, and then also the pressure to achieve. So as we mentioned before as well, that the question is not really if these services exist, but also how students can access them and how they can be supportive. So I would like to start now with Stanislav and ask a bit about how universities should respond to this of students sometimes don't have the time also, or they also lack now the information maybe, or they don't access the information. So balancing this academic pressure, the need to achieve, but then also the challenges that they face, and also personal responsibilities. How do you think universities can answer this?
Yeah, this is not a product placement, but I really do think that Masaryk University is doing a good job trying to promote the service. 5 years ago, when we put some free slots for therapy or consultation out, it wasn't used because nobody knew there is some sort of service. That changed drastically. Now it's like 1 month waiting list when it's at its peak during the semester. So people definitely do know about the service. Question is if each one of students know about the service, or if it kind of is being shared by channels that some have more approach to than others. That's a question we need to ask. At the same time, I think the promotion is being done good there, and I really wanted to mention it, and it is something that I would join as a good idea to do. Don't be content with, yeah, we have this service and maybe they will gonna find us on their own. That would be maybe too optimistic, because some people really do struggle finding time for therapy, let alone finding where and who to contact. I don't want to do any hot takes, but I don't like this vibes, and not coming from you, but sometimes that the psychological help should be focused on those counseling centers, on psychologists. I do like this approach that well-being of students can be focus of the studies as a whole. I think it's a good practice abroad where well-being is taken into consideration when professors are writing courses. They having some sort of idea that there's always a professor that thinks that students have only his course during the semester, and it happens to all of us, but it's a good thing when it happens that professors are aware that people have many tasks. For instance, it's not a product placement, but several years ago we've done this this mini research of when are deadlines of students in bachelor study of psychology accumulating, so that we can give this information to professors so they know, okay, this 1 week, this 8 week of semester is super tough for everybody, and maybe we need to dilute a little bit and put it to different dates. So I think things like that can be done. At the same time, I'm aware that professors have their capacity and they're doing our job, and not every professor has a mental space and capacity to do all of this. So I would say, and that's my wild guess, that it would be nice to identify which activities like this would yield the biggest result and also cost least amount of energy. I think that would be a good move by university. Yeah, something like this.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting approach, that we see that there are many support activities, but this, what you mentioned, is a bit more of a systematic approach to the courses and designing the learning process a bit more, including the mental health and well-being. So yes,
Maybe
please,
I
please.
forgot one thing. I was thinking about it in the beginning, and now it popped up again. I wasn't sure if to share because it's just something that is an idea that we are floating. But from some surveys, we do know that the population most hit by some stress and mental worries and troubles is the population of students that are combining work with studies, with some personal problems. So finding some ways how to make lower barrier for them to find the therapy, find the time for therapy, might be some sort of courses that would have credit reward, or not reward, but dotation, so they wouldn't need to cut from their study life, but it might join the study life. Per definition. At the same time, it wouldn't be possible to make a group therapy like that because it would be for for bigger quantity of students. But some sort of psychoeducational course with accreditation might be some idea, but it's still in the beginnings in our heads currently.
That's actually perfect to move forward also to what Charlotte is doing, offering these low threshold activities and many programs and workshops that you mentioned. But I think the challenge that we also observe is that even if they exist, students sometimes don't engage. So why do you think that is, and what could we do about it?
Yeah, this has been a very hot topic this year. Maybe something to provide some context. It's not something that I notice in my institution, but it's something that we notice across Flanders, that a lot of other higher education institutions, they struggle more and more getting students to sign up for their sessions. We see that students, there's this a bigger need for these kinds of sessions to be organized, psychoeducational sessions, like peer support sessions, things like that, small group sessions. But yeah, that doesn't automatically translate into like showing up for them. And that's also something that you mentioned really well as well, is that it's this general sense of students finding it's another task on our endless to-do list. So yeah, I think, and that's also what we're discussing with other counselors among other higher education institutions, because in the end, we kind of don't really know. Like, it's a really like, oh, what's happening? And also like, it's more, it's more than before. So we really noticed it this year. But it really comes from this, like, they have this pressure of, academia and needing to achieve and have academic success. And I think they then prioritize, working hard and studying over, accessing those services because it's another task on their to-do list. And it's also paradoxing and interesting because, if you have, your bucket with like things piling up into your bucket of life experiences, and there's a lot of stress coming, and then there's a lot of academic pressure and tasks and exams and whatever, then at some point your little bucket overloads, and then, you get overwhelmed, and then, burnout or things like that, or anxiety. And the things that, those services, they are the little holes that you can make in the bottom of the bucket full of water, let's say. And then it's those services that can actually, empty the bucket, for example, a workshop on like stress management or a relaxation workshop or things like that. They will help with coping with all that academic pressure and students know that, but yeah, it's just they see it again as a task. I notice, and even though they know, it's a little bit hard. And that's maybe my take, and I've been thinking about this as well. And sometimes I think like if it's maybe if it's like information sessions or where you have to talk or think a lot, or think about your own working style or coping mechanisms, things like that, or like sharing it in group sessions. Maybe it's but that's really like my personal take. Like maybe it's like cognitive again, like they have to think and they have to. So I was maybe thinking like, and that's also what I do in my work. Like sometimes I organize, breathing sessions or meditation sessions, and they don't really have to think; they just have to do. So it's way more practical. And I noticed that these sessions where they can just do something straight away and take that with them home are a bit more popular, let's say, because they don't have to think or use their brains. In a sense, yes, they do, but it's way more practical and hands-on, less than like a 1-hour workshop on time management or burnout or. So maybe that's also a bit of the thing, that it's like another cognitive load. So maybe more practical sessions could counter that a little bit, or shorter sessions, or yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry, like including it in the. I really like that idea, including it as like a part of their educational program, which then lowers the need of, or the feeling of like, oh, I have to do that as well, and it can just be part of my program because, yeah.
Okay, so something that is accessible in a way in their daily life and kind of doesn't add to their to-do list, but takes away from it, is more practical. But we see that even with all of these challenges, even with all of these activities, Irena, something that you mentioned is that still the challenge is communicating and the communication overload. So even if there are these activities, and we also now maybe know better how to create them, how to design them, how can institutions also better communicate these opportunities to students?
In my opinion, it's necessary to do it formally and informally. I don't know if it works. And formal channel is basically the bucket for the first-year students, where they receive an information, or the university approach towards the barriers that they actively work on discarding the barriers for the students. Physical access to the university, but also informal. And the informal is based on the research, as I mentioned, because we asked what they need. We asked the students and the teachers what are their needs regarding inclusion and barriers and education. That means that if we create some workshops or seminars, we base them on their needs. So, for example, teachers don't know how to work with a student in crisis. So we provide them some seminars which can motivate or show them how to deal with these students. Or if students feel that they are not able to express their needs, so we might provide some seminar for communication skills, or, for example, focused on their study needs, because one of the things I can do is also help them with their study needs to improve their success during their studies. And our university created basically an open university strategy, where we focus on opening the doors of the teachers to students, even though if they are not tutors, but we try to support the environment and create support the feeling that students actually can access the teachers. That means that we also try to motivate teachers to not only point the duties and the requirements, but also to add, if you need something, you can come to me, or you can come to Augustin, that's our center. So if you feel that you are overwhelmed, you can contact our therapists, And my colleague Susanna and her team created also a very good website called Help Zone. And this is the website where every student anonymously can access and see a different situation and answers. What to do if? What to do if I am stressed? What to do if I don't know what else to do? Or even what if I am suicidal, or I feel I want to commit suicide? So there are many different situations, and Susanna and her team used also the case studies to practically show how this help can be supportive in different situations. And one of the biggest advantages is that there is a link that the students can anonymously make a meeting with one of our crisis therapists, and they can come there and or talk to them online without telling their names. So of course the therapist will see their face, but since he doesn't connect it with a special name, the students can express more freely what they feel and what they need.
Thank you. So we discussed a bit of this formal structures, this approach of what kind of activities and support can be made for students. But also what we already mentioned a bit is that it's not only about these designed activities, but it's also about the whole environment of the university and the experience that students have while they are learning. And one of the aspects can also be the belonging that they feel with the student community in the university. And belonging is not only created through those formal structures. So often students find support through peer communities, student organizations, which I also experienced, some informal spaces that they have, and just to feel connected to others, to their teachers, to their peers. So kind of going into this a bit more approach of creating a safe environment at the university and also the sense of belonging. Charlotte, with the university, also what you mentioned is that your experience in the College of Europe is special because students live on campus. They have this experience that is very intense for them. So what kind of initiatives or environments do you think actually help students feel more like they belong on campus?
So I can speak from the experience at the College of Europe. What we're really proud of and what works really well is that we have a lot of student-led initiatives. Students can form student societies, they can organize events, can organize activities. And when we see that they can organize, activities and events and that they can start up societies such as there's the Queer European Society, it's for queer people, or LGBT from the LGBTQ community. There is all the national societies, so like people from their country, they can start a society, and then within that society they have this sense of belonging to the nationality or any other community. So we see that works really well and that students really feel connected and feel like they belong. And also they feel that they can, take ownership of what they do when they're studying through organizing, activities and debates and what they do. So that works really well. And I think that's really important. So these student-led initiatives, that they have this control. But also I find really important, so what helps students that they feel like they belong is inclusive measures. We have at the college, and I think a lot of universities have a reasonable accommodations policy. So students having mental, physical disabilities or exceptional circumstances can ask for specific accommodations at an institution. This is case by case, so it's just the student going up and then asking for an accommodation when it comes to exams or taking classes or internships. But I think if you are an institution and you already apply these inclusive measures, so these are measures taken for everyone, but that can, for example, an example of that is, for example, exams in digital format. So they can, it's not just written. People, I don't know, with dyslexia or other or motorical disabilities, for example, like when it's a digital format, and when it's for all students. So not being dyslexic or any other mental or physical disability, but it's for all students. The fact that you don't have to ask for it and that it's already there can create a sense of like, okay, like I feel like I can be my full self. I feel like I belong. So I think that's really important that institutions should strive for these inclusive measures. Also, for example, an example is making presentations available before a class. So it's not just exam accommodations, it's also just like big institution, educational accommodations, things like that. So I think that's also really important for institutions to do. It's just like having these inclusive measures, so everyone feels included and supported and feel like they belong. And also something that at the College of Europe we're really good with is because we're very close to our students. If we see trends happening like behavior or things appearing or situational factors, for example, if there's in our population of students, we notice that a lot of students are coming to us with like family loss or grief, or they're struggling with some family situations. What we can we can be very responsive and kort op de bal spelen is a Dutch thing. I don't know how to translate that into English, but like we can very responsively implement, group sessions, like for example, grief sessions for, the students that we saw that were struggling. We can work together with our external psychologist, and then they can organize these group sessions. And, then it's an example that we had as well. We had this grief session, and students came up to us and they were like, oh, I really felt not alone anymore. I felt like I could turn to someone. So I feel like it's also, this responsiveness of institutions, as you said, like also the needs coming from students, like, okay, this is a need that we have, and it's good that institutions listen to us and then facilitate these kinds of group sessions or support sessions, and also something that I think I wrote down is opportunities for contribution. So students feel they belong when they can shape the environment and not just live in the environment. So for example, what we also have is a diversity, equity and inclusion committee, and staff and students are part of that. And we work on like several diversity and inclusion related efforts. For example, last year there was a project where we were designing more clear wayfinding, so more where you need to be, where the classrooms are, how the buildings are, graphically formed. It wasn't clear before, or like some neurodivergent students came to us and said like, oh, it's actually really like not clear. So what we did is we sat together with those students and with staff members, and we worked together on like, okay, how can we make it better? How can we make it more clear? So like, yeah, the fact that students feel like they can contribute to, environmental things or or policies even, I think is really important, that they can feel like, yeah, they belong. And I wrote a thing down, and I think it's really nice. Belonging grows when students feel they can show up as their full selves, and when the institution responds to their needs in real time. And I think that sums it up quite nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. I do agree as well. I think also as a representative of a student organization, I do feel like the representation and the contribution part is very, very important for students to feel seen and feel like they matter in an institution. But also what you mentioned is to have a bit more of a personal approach, like seeing the trends, seeing a bit more student as a person, not just their academic performance. And going on this topic of inclusion, it can also be a bit more difficult for students with invisible disabilities, for them to seek support and also participate in these activities. So Irena, with your work, I wanted to ask if you have any advice on practical solutions for universities on how to make these activities and the environment a bit more approachable and inclusive.
I would agree with you, Charlotte, that the students need to feel that they belong there and they matter, and they are also able to help when needed. So, for example, if students don't know how to behave to their classmates who have visual impairment or hearing impairment or who have to use wheelchair, we may provide practical seminars about how to behave. And our experience is that when, for example, they go outside for excursion or for some practical teaching, for example, as a practice for teaching, they really help each other because they know how. They have that not only knowledge, but the practical skill, and they feel empowered. And that's also something which matters, that we give them this empowerment. And of course, we all need to feel safe. Safety is also very important. That means that many students find out that they have some kind of difficulty only during their university studies, and there is nothing wrong to come to us and say, I have never experienced this, but now I feel that I don't understand the sources, I cannot read it properly, or it's too much and I don't know where to start, I don't know how to plan my schedule. And this is something we also say, it's okay, there is nothing wrong, we don't judge you, and we can offer you, not only support but practical help. But also this safety have to be also on the teacher side. So also teachers need to feel safe, and they should not feel that somebody is misusing the support. So we need to set up boundaries. For example, how many times one student can apply for the term of exam, even though if he has a support and possibility for individual term, it should not be 5 or 6 times. The support is also in boundaries, that we set up our boundaries for all the students and all the teachers. And I think it's also in the vocabulary, because I would say that sometimes teachers and students use the vocabulary which may feel that it stigmatizes the students, because they say, oh, you are psychotic, or you are depressed, and it's very vague and a not specific term which basically stigmatizes, oh, you are not good enough, or you don't belong here because you are something else. And also, if the person needs to go to psychiatrist for help, there is nothing wrong, and he's still okay, and he still belongs. Or if he doesn't know how to communicate his needs or her needs, we can, help him in a halfway, say, okay, maybe it would be this, but try to learn how to express. Or there are different types of communication ways, so we can use different things, because I also have personal experience with persons with autistic children, so I know that we can use different ways of communication. And I also feel that it's very important to keep the open doors for all, even the adults or the students.
Thank you. And also on a bit still a practical side, to make this a bit more personal, but also make sure that students feel seen in their community, I wanted to ask you, Stanislav, what are some maybe early stage signs that universities, teachers, but also peers can recognize before a student reaches a crisis point?
I think that to some degree is a reasonable question, because this is something that we can actually do. For many people in crisis situation, feeling that people around them care and are kind of providing reaching hand can mean a lot in that moment. And when I'm thinking about teachers, I think vast majority of teachers I ever spoke to are really good at discerning like what's going on when something changes. It's usually the way that we kind of notice something, that there is some contrast, that the person is late when they haven't been late before, stops submitting their manuscripts, or whatever work they also do, start behaving differently. I think, to be honest, I don't think that's the problem, because teachers, from my experience, are usually really good at it. But I think like looking and seeing are two different things, and to some degree, some destigmatization and popularization of what, at least to some degree, teachers are not going to be doing any diagnostics, and they don't need to know everything, but at least to some degree, some education of them, what can they be seeing, what can they be experiencing, to know that it is valid, that the people are not conjuring symptoms, but they are actually living some tough things. That might be beneficial, because not only they can be seeing something, that also might mean that they'll react in a more empathic way. I know that what I'm gonna say now might sound harsh, but I'm also thinking about what Irene just said about setting boundaries, because when we talk about what can surroundings do and what can context do and environment do, it's legitimate, it's all right, it's great, but also I would like to maximize the responsibility of the students themselves. It's super difficult to reach out when I'm real low, that's without question. But the support that we are providing kind of needs to develop their own ability to support and go through things and not being dependent on it. And also set boundaries for the teachers themselves, because I'm strong belief of boundaries, and I do believe that if they're set correctly and fairly, they are protecting students as well as teachers, so they can not burn out and be providing their service for long, meaningful, happy time. So to me, at this point, I'm not sure if I'm able to say clear-cut response, because I think we're moving in a gray zone of what we can do. And to quote Bismarck, okay, that may be too much, but like, is the art of what is possible or attainable. And I think great many teachers are doing with what's attainable and possible, and I'm trying to have this in mind when talking about this.
Thank you. So I think the conclusion is that community can also be a bit of first response, actually, because creating this environment, the community in the university can be something that might even prevent a bit from reaching this crisis point and making these steps before, so making the education and the space inclusive, creating the space for students to be contributing and that they feel represented, that they have activities to engage with, can be something that is preventive. But now to wrap up a bit, as we already discussed that this topic, it is becoming a bit of a hot topic, and that universities do recognize that it matters. We see that also students feel more open to talk about it, that they feel a bit more safe. We discussed a bit how universities can practically create a safe environment, and also that the community can play an important role. So as we are coming to an end of the first part, I just will give you a bit of a challenge. So for each one of you, there will be two parts of a question. So one would be, if you could change one thing in higher education tomorrow to better support students and their needs, what would it be? And then the second part would be, what also gives you hope for the future in this topic? So whoever would want to start?
Maybe I will start in this because I was thinking about it a lot. And I feel like this world is changing fast. And the amount of theoretical knowledge won't be sufficient for these students who are studying now. And the study should not be only about getting the knowledge and getting some skills, but also develop their social net. And that university needs to put more importance on the social skills of students in different ways. On the seminars where they can be closer together and develop some social connectivity among each other. Or when they go outside to the practical world to try their skills in real life, and they really get the first response on how they actually communicate with foreign people they have never met. So all these should be included in the social development of the university studies. And what gives me hope, I have studied already 20 years ago. And in that time, there was nothing like this. There were no support centers. There were no people who I could go to or my friend could go to. And I actually have quite a few friends who didn't finish studies because of their mental problems. And what gives me hope is that we are here today, that we talk about it and we really do something. Not only talk, but we really do something. And it has improved a lot. So it gives me hope that it will get better and there will be less students who will drop out because of their mental health problems or because of the lack of communication. And on the other side, we will still keep it in the boundaries of university studies because we still have to keep up some level of the requirements. And we will send young students to their life, prepare not only with their skills, but also with their good mental health.
Oh, is it okay?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if I could change one thing in higher education tomorrow, this is something that has been talked about a lot. Is for me, I think it would really be investing in training academic staff, professors, teacher assistants, to recognize signs early and to equip them with some sense of like confidence of like, if you see students struggling, like, okay, I'm confident to, you know, go talk to that student and say like, okay, I hear you and I know where I can forward you to. So I think that's something that I think is really important. That's I think what we all also talked about, that is really important, because it's still teachers and, you know, they're still the pillars of the educational system, and students look up to them, and, you know, they're in close contact with them every single day in classes. And I think it could be really great. And I'm not saying we need to turn professors and teachers into therapists, not at all, but like just to give them that, you know, the tools and the knowledge as well, like, okay, we can forward our students towards this, but also to give them some like knowledge on, you know, the importance of, as what I talked about before, like inclusive measures, like, you know, making like an example, like making, for example, your PowerPoints available before, because it can help certain students with following the classes better, students who are, you know, struggling with attention during, you know, big lectures, that can really help them. And I think just like educating also, you know, professors and academic staff can really help in that. And because I also believe that, yeah, the responsibility should not just be dedicated to one office taking care of the students, but it should be like a shared institutional culture. And I think by, you know, teaching professors, academic staff, it's way more carried by, you know, the institution, not just like psychological services or just one office. Like hope as well, you know, what gives me hope is, as you said, like, so much is changing. So many universities are investing way more in, you know, also reducing psychological care. You know, for example, something that we do at the college as well is we sponsor psychological sessions, and I also see this across nations. You know, students are, I don't think we talked about this, but with financial difficulties, you know, accessing care sometimes is difficult. So like lowering that threshold, you know, so providing, you know, budget to be available to, you know, support students. So that's also what gives me hope, is like, you know, these things are changing, and yeah, so and also and that ties it a little bit into, you know, Erasmus Plus and mobility of students, that, you know, when students of many different nationalities and cultures come together, they share things, or they learn new things about, oh, this is not something that happens in my institution, so it happens here, maybe I can take that back home, and like this we can, like, you know, build bridges between institutions as well and learn from each other. And so yeah, I also see that's happening with student mobility, that can help. So that's also my hope, that can just become better and better. Thank you.
Yeah. Just one thing to change. I mean, if I should change just one thing, it would be, okay, it's a hot take incoming, but I make a disclaimer. I do realize that what students go through is completely valid, and that's nothing against it. But I sometimes have this feeling that we tend to pathologize how bad students feel during the studies. What I'm trying to say is they are feeling bad in a situation that is objectively demanding and almost objectively bad sometimes. And I don't like this vibe that we should have, like, mental health is being positive and smiling all the time. I think mental health is feeling sad when I'm living sad circumstances, or that I'm feeling really stressed, exhausted when there is a lot of on my plate. And I sometimes feel like there is this sort of a surprise on the side of students, parents, teachers, and that the vibe is, well, they're somehow not managing their studies. Whereas for me, when I'm listening to the students about how much they need to attend to, they need to do, I'm more amazed that they're actually managing to do so, not they're sometimes not managing to do so. And I think the expectations, I really like those inputs from Charlotte and Irene, that maybe there are some referential frames on Instagram, maybe somewhere else, but there's this idea like this should go smooth. Why it's not going smooth? I like the idea that the growth is not always linear. I might even dare say that's usually not linear, that we have different curves of progress, and sometimes we repeat some semesters, sometimes we are really lost during our studies, and I sometimes feel that students feel alone in this. Whereas from my perspective, and maybe I'm deformed by my job, but I feel like this is more normal than those rare occasions, like everything is going smoothly up till retirement. So I would like to normalize this to some degree, and so that students don't have to feel so alone when they're struggling with something like this. And hope was the second. Yeah. What really gives me hope are people that come to therapy highly motivated, with high agency, with notepads in their hands and pencil in the second hand. I mean, you don't have to come to therapy like this, and we come to our therapies in different states, so of course we don't always have energy to do so. But to be honest, the service that we provide totally stands on people like this that are brave enough to come to therapy. I know it might sound like slogan, but I really mean it. I do admire each and every person that comes to therapy, because I do realize how much guts it takes to come there, to seek some help, to try something new, to say, hey, I'm feeling really bad and I don't know what to do. That takes guts. And without people like this, our service would be like a saxophone in a corner that nobody plays. Or some others. I don't know why I said I don't play saxophone. I don't. But they make the whole thing meaningful and having some sort of outcome and purpose. And whenever I'm feeling down and some client like this comes, it's invigorating, and I'm super grateful for them. So that's what gives me hope.
Thank you very much. So now that we have heard from our speakers, their experiences and also best practices, I wanted to open the floor to you if you have any comments, reflections, or also questions. So we can also have a moment of a common discussion. So if there is anyone that would like to start.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna. I am representing European Association for Applied Sciences. Oh, just 1 second. Thank you. So what I wanted to bring a bit is also the lack of awareness of the process taken or the process needed for well-being, because very often we think we're taking 1 or 2 sessions and we're going to be fine. But I think it's more like learning a new language. So it's not like I'm going to take 2 French classes for French, read a book in French, and I will be fluent in French. So I think something that we are not aware of is how much investment in time sometimes it takes to achieve balanced well-being or long-term well-being and sustainability for someone. And what I wanted to ask you, if in your practice, also thank you so much for what you're doing. I think what you're doing is amazing, and I'm super happy to see people invested in students' well-being. I'm very happy to hear you today as well, and thank you for the organizers for choosing this topic. And a quick question, whether in your personal practice you have interacted with discussions about AI related to student well-being. Thank you.
Personally, no. So that hasn't been a topic, but thank you for the question. It's really interesting.
Recently, I have talked with one of my clients, and they have mentioned that for some reason, appreciation coming from an AI is much more worthy than from any other person. Like when AI said, "You're doing a good job, this is amazing," like from people, they weren't able to take it or to be like, believing in this, and because it sounds objective, because, well, it's a machine, so it's like, he knows, the machine knows. So that's the recent experience from last week. In general, I think there are many different experiences. Some students use it we know how students use it. And some people use it for some sort of discussions and for channeling thoughts. I think it can have potential, but I don't have any more substantial anecdotes in regards to that. And for some big picture stuff, I think it's too soon and I don't know enough about it. But I know there are some chatbots being trained for therapeutic purposes. And I mean, I'm not against it at all because I think it can be, we've spoken about lowering the threshold and barriers. And for some people, calling somewhere, reaching out to some living person, it can be too big of a step. So this can create some mid-step, and that's my techno-optimistic view of the thing. But I don't know enough about this. But thanks for the question and commentary.
I have one small note about it because I recently talked to some colleagues of mine, and they expressed worries that students, when they cannot overcome some difficulty, for example, in writing an essay or find some information, they let the AI do it for them. That means they already learned how to make their life easier without even try to solve it by themselves. And that this approach will then, create a problem in the real life. If somebody says you cannot use AI or you have to use a different way, but you have to know how to solve some problem, not only by having the knowledge, but mainly finding the right approach, finding the exactly social skills to approach other people. And that the way how students use AI during their studies may, to make it too easy for them without even start trying. So it's more from the teachers, the worry, than from the students themselves.
Yeah, maybe something that I'm thinking of, it hasn't really come up in discussions that I had with students. But what I do notice is sometimes students just feel alone in their feeling, and then sure, AI can reconfirm like you're not alone, or like, give confirmation into the direction that you want. But I also feel like genuine human connection and just having another person sitting in front of you and just being like, yeah, that's difficult. And yeah, that can just having a person, reaffirming that can already give a sense of, I'm heard and I'm not alone. And maybe something not conventional that I sometimes do is even, physical touch. Like sometimes when I see like a student is going through a lot, and I'm just like, you want to hold my hand, like, just to, to deconnect or to connect with someone, and to cope, and so that can sometimes also really help. It's just this, physical touch, or just like, I'm here, and I think AI can't replace that. So I'm still hopeful that AI won't replace all, the psychological services in the future. But yeah, so I think really this like human connection and is still a real benefit to the current student services. Yeah.
Maybe just one last add. I feel like this is until the AI says positive things, it's supportive, but if they become too dependent and AI starts saying wrong things, then they will listen more to the AI than the real people. They don't learn how to communicate without words, exactly that nonverbal connection, which is typical for us humans and should not be forgotten. So we need to, as at the university, even if it's not really, of course, professional to touch those students, but sometimes when the therapy, if you ask and they said, yes, I need a hug, and they really experience hug, it can be as healing as the word which we are saying to them.
But of course, always with consent. I will never like just randomly touch a student, but it's asked, or sometimes they ask, and I'm there, like, yeah. Just.
But thank you. I know it's 2 steps back, but I really appreciate the comment that mental health is not that much about what we know, but much more about what we do and train. I mean, if it was just about knowledge, we would hand out brochures and we would go home and be happy. I would be happy. Everybody would be happy. But I do like when everybody, time for time, reminds this sentiment that it's about what we're doing, what we're practicing. To me, it's like mental hygiene equals dental hygiene. I always forgot to, I'm not sure why I'm saying that, but it's more about what I'm doing than more what I'm knowing. So thanks.
Do we have more questions or comments? Yes.
Hi, I'm not going to stand up. So I'm from ES in Belgium. And first of all, thank you very much for everything that you're doing. You're really on the front line, so to speak, supporting students. And it's really important. Also, thank you for all of the insights you've shared. I wanted to kind of add an additional aspect of it, which we haven't talked so much about yet, which is kind of the intersectional element, as well as students are coming to bringing all sorts of baggage with them to the university or to a learning space, and they're going to have more systemic barriers also to accessing the kind of supports that you offer if they're a student from, like if they're having to work at the same time to support themselves. Or with ESN, we're working with international students, and they have different kinds of barriers in accessing your supports. Like Charlotte, you're talking really about the concrete measures that you have and accessing concrete accommodations. And so one thing we see with mobility students specifically is that when you go somewhere, you don't have the same, because of the barriers to entry or of these boundaries that are important to accessing accommodations, they're not really able to access them or have the same kind of protected, recognized student with a disability, if you have ADHD, if you have autism, status to get accommodations as local students do. And so, yeah, I'm curious if you have, in your experience, if you have any thoughts on how to balance making sure that the services that you have and the accommodations specifically are accessible to all students, even students who are only there for a short time.
Maybe I can start, but it's really specific and linked to the institution that I work in. As I said, it's 340 students, and in the beginning of the year, we have all students together in one room, and we call them mandatory sessions. So really, all students have to be in that same room, and then we talk about it. We talk about, we have a reasonable accommodations policy. These are the services. You can turn to us about anything. Like, we're very low threshold care. As I said, we're not psychologists. We work with psychologists, but sometimes knowing that you can just talk to a person that isn't necessarily really specifically for a therapist can sometimes, lower that threshold. And we really portray ourselves that way. Like, you can just turn to us about anything. Like, it can also, be an example, like my cat died last week and I'm really sad about it and I just want to talk to someone about it, or I miss my mom or things like that. So we really try to make it as low threshold as possible. And since we see these students in the beginning of the year, we have everyone, so all local. I mean, we only have 20 Belgian students, I think, at the college, but so a very international group. And yeah, because we say that in the beginning, we're here and these are the services available, and we have a reasonable accommodations policy. It's also communicated through different ways, emails, that we make sure that they know it exists. So that's something that we do and that we can do. We have the environment for that to allow. And I know a lot of institutions don't have that, so we're very blessed to have that environment. I don't know if that's answering your question a little bit.
Maybe also more for the other two, because you don't have the same, specifically for mobility, there's also the administrative and procedural barriers to getting a recognized, other institutions maybe have higher thresholds to getting access to accommodations that aren't really accessible to students who are on mobility. So I'm curious if, for example, if you ever are seeing mobility students that are able to get to your services, or how it's working at your institutions.
Actually, this is a really sensitive topic right now and very important, because I am now in charge of accommodating students from abroad in the Erasmus exchange. And last year we have experienced several specific issues which are mostly connected to finance and the fact that if there are students on our university, we can pay the tutors or to the teachers from our own sources. But the Erasmus student doesn't have this type of support from the financial aspect. So we, or they, probably their institutions, need to find sources for this, financial sources. And we need to communicate it before they start the exchange. Depends on the time of accommodation. For example, if he needs or she needs more time, it's usually not a problem because we have several students with this accommodation, so we can provide it for Erasmus students as well. But for example, to provide an assistant for students with visual impairments, which this requires really everyday assistance, and we need to sort the financial aspects before we start providing assistant. We can provide it. We have even the English-speaking assistant, so we have no problem in the language barrier. But we need to, for example, include it if this lady provides assistance every day. It will be basically like a salary to her, and it will require to have deduction, regular deduction for state, for insurance as a normal salary, and we have to include it into the final price. These deductions, or taxes. It will be taxed because it's over certain limit of payment. So it cannot be just an exceptional financial reward. So these are very practical matters which we are now thinking of and sorting, and we would really love to accommodate. And another thing is the student has to provide us the doctor's notes or other required notes in English, which sometimes they don't know, for example, that the university should help with it. That if they want to travel as exchange students, the university should help them with this type of processing. But it's also sometimes difficult that we require something. We are obliged to require some documents, and they need to provide us in English.
Yeah. I do hope that I understood the question correctly, and if not, please correct me afterwards. I'll try to respond to this. I think it's a good thought, and I can join it wholeheartedly, that when we have mobility students, they are far from home. Sometimes they are fleeing countries when there are some conflicts currently. So we have this approach that they can be searching help more often. And there is a dedicated psychologist providing consultation in Ukrainian language, and we try to provide consultation in English as much as possible. And we are thinking about this a lot because we are offering some group therapies, and there has been none in English. So we created with my colleague one in English, and the capacity was 16. 2 people wrote us that they would like to join the group, which was a little bit sad, but at the same time, it might not be the format that was currently in demand. So we didn't start with the group, but we were thinking a lot about the students because, from my point of view, they are definitely more vulnerable, being far from home in different environment and so forth, mainly so forth. As for students with other special needs, we have actually, that's going to be a little confusing, but don't worry, it is confusing for me as well. We have actually 2 workplaces that deals with as a topic of mental health, and Student Center of Teiresias is dealing with students with special needs that may include students with, physical, mental, any sort of, disadvantage. And as a teacher, I can actually see, this basic information. Okay, the student has special needs, and during the course of a semester, this is what would be welcome if you adhere to as a teacher. So we do get some information about how to treat the students. So it's fair because I'm going to say something really obvious, but like the same circumstances for everybody are not going to be fair because everybody's living different circumstances with different starting positions. So it is something that's taken into consideration during the semester, during the courses. And as for our help, we are trying to be available for those students and sometimes try to do this extra step. So I really do hope that was the question. Otherwise, I wasted everybody's 3 minutes, but I'm glad that it was. Oh, good, good.
Thank you very much. I will still sit down if that's okay with you. Does it work? Yeah. Oh, perfect. All right. So, hi, good afternoon. My name is Hradec. I'm a student here at KU Leuven. And I would like to ask a bit more about the stigmatization of mental health, because it's probably one of the most stigmatized topics in like the common society, right? Also, I'm very sorry. I just came from the exam, so my brain is a bit mushy. But I would like to ask, not divisively, but more like overall, about the gender aspect of it, maybe, because at least in a lot of like young people's communities, it is very much still this narrative of, oh, guys have to just push the problems aside. Usually, at least in my kind of periphery, I see people who are really holding it until the very last moment, and then it all falls down for them instead of seeking help sooner. And I would like to ask if you've noticed, oh, it's interesting, if you've noticed, well, 3 questions. Firstly, if you've noticed that this stigmatization and like gender division is happening. Secondly, if it has changed over the course of your careers, like maybe now it's a bit more positive with some movements in societies and so on. And thirdly, what would be some institutional solutions to combat this, right? To say, okay, this is a safe space for everybody. Everybody's allowed to come in, and we actually encourage it so that people do come to it. That's probably about it. Thank you very much.
I feel like I'm going to mansplain gender topics, which I'm not comfortable with, but I'm not sure if I will be able to or willing to answer all 3 questions. But I think it can definitely be seen, and is one of those things, like once you see it, you cannot unsee it. In regards to mental health, the first notoriously known thing that pops in my head is how much often is the borderline personality disorder being diagnosed for women than for men, which we do know it tends to be over-diagnosed. But I don't really think we should go that far. I mean, even with the basic stuff like communicating your frustration. Me and my friends, like women friends, always tend to discuss when there's some meeting, and my friend like smashes the table and says it's gonna be like this and that. People around are like, oh, it's a bad part of the month. Oh my God, she's so hysterical. If men would do this, it would be like, oh, what a giga chat, what a great move. So it's not fair at all. And we can see it, I think, in daily life. So I think it's great when things are being spoken about and named like, okay, there is unfairness going on, and it's systematic unfairness. I think I don't remember any sort of specific initiative from my university. I would welcome it very much. I don't think it's a loaded word, because many people conjure the word gender and in some political wars, but it's daily reality for majority of people. I do believe it tends to discriminate women more, which is so funny because I'm only male on this panel. But I think in regards to male part of society, I think you raised a good question, like, is it okay to be vulnerable for men? Is it okay to be like this or that? But I think it overall is net loss for everybody. So I'm glad that's being raised, even though I'm not sure I have solution other than popularize it in a meaningful, not heated way. But if you ask me about specifics, I wouldn't be able to provide any specifics. But I'm glad that you raised the question. Thank you, Raju.
I'm gonna form thoughts while I'm speaking. I tend to do that. So what you're saying, it's not something that I personally notice that, for example, women come see me more often than men. I think it's fairly equal. Also, our percentage women men is also around 50%, like divided. So it's not like, you know, so that's quite equal. But I think an example that pops into my head is in November. There is this No Shave Movember, which is highly on the topic of like mental health for men and suicide in men, and that we try to break the stigma of, you know, of men can also be vulnerable and like ask for help. I think, you know, so we actually organize campaigns, and we really focus that month on, you know, men's mental health. We make announcements, and students are also organizing a lot, or like raising funds, for example. And I think because we have this kind of initiative, it kind of sets the press, or like the culture in our institution of like, okay, so this is being organized in my institution, so I feel like I can, you know, go and access mental health services. So that I think helps for men in general to go and go for support services. Maybe that's also, and then I come back to like the intercultural difference. Maybe that's also depending on different countries where you live. Sometimes this stigmatization can be more in certain countries than in others. So that's also where you notice a difference. But from my point of view, or like what I experience is there's also a lot of men coming, you know, for sessions or workshops. And actually, there was a time I organized yoga classes, and usually it's a very female, you know, dominated thing. But last year, at some point, there was one class, and there were only men in my yoga class, and I thought, like, let's go. Okay, wonderful. So I thought that was really amazing, and I think, you know, it's just the way you portray it, that is for everyone, and that, you know, maybe also just sometimes naming it and just saying, like, you know, there is this tendency, for example, for, you know, men to like boil it up, or like, you know, until the very last moment, but like, let's not do that, and let's try to encourage that with each other, you know, encourage your friends and encourage, you know, so just saying that as well sometimes can help. I don't know if that answers. You had 3 questions, but I don't remember them, but I hope it answers some of your questions. Yeah.
Thank you. It's amazing. I know it was a lot of questions, but great.
Just a short addition that it really it's connected to the load they bring from their previous studies and from their home culture, basically. And I think it's important to motivate the teachers to work with students when they see during the teaching, for example, when they have seminars or they discuss about books, about their opinions, to challenge their thinking, even in the point of asking help. For example, why the men are always strong, or why they men have to carry all the burden, or, you know, ask the questions, work with them. And it's like a prequel to our help. So if there is some sensitive topic which they find out, they can also, you know, say, yeah, that's something to think of, or that's something to discuss with some other colleagues, for example, from our center. So it's cooperation. It's not only that the men would come and ask separately. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, we can do one more question, last question, very short, and then we will move towards small snacks.
Okay. Well, so I will
So
try.
the pressure is here.
Yes, exactly. Sorry. I actually wanted to ask a little bit about the academic mechanisms, right? Because of course you are team members, and you mentioned before that it's important that the academics really make the reasonable adjustments, and that they are helping to kind of make those bridges. But for me, like one of the things that happened for me once when I was working for the university was that a student decided to come back from their mobility because of mental health charges, and the professors actually refused student to let back into regular classes, meaning the student had a half a year of not being able to go into classes. And I felt at that point very limited in what I could do in order to, you know, support the student. So I'm just wondering, like, when you bump into this type of issues with people that are not willing, what are the tools that you need in order to support students in these cases?
This time I start because this is something I actually also had to solve. That actually our support is in a point of recommendation. It should be followed, but we have no legal yet. We have no legal ways how to enforce it. So that's one thing that I'm solving right now, that how to enforce it, and the only way is to talk to the teachers and find a common ground. That means that, for example, I should go personally to this colleague of mine and say, look, it's beneficial for you as well, because even if from financial point of view, you will get more money when you ensure that the students will finish the studies successfully. Or you can find some other ways how to communicate with them, with him or her, so you both will be satisfied. So it's only personal discussion. I have no legal or frame how to force it right now.
I was also wondering if it's a question probably, or maybe for somebody who deals with students' rights. When I was a PhD student, I had this small, of course, unpaid work as a kind of student counselor for their rights. And when they had some conflict with their teachers, whatever that may be, fairness or some remarks or whatever, I have tried to facilitate the communication between those two parties. And I'm wondering if maybe that would be a situation for somebody like that tries to cover or represent maybe a bad word, because I try to be neutral and focused on what is their rights. But for somebody like this, as Irene mentioned, as a counselor, it's more focused on, okay, how did it make you feel, right? Rather than, okay, what's your rights? What should you do right now? So it's different communication with different focus. And from my point of view, at least how I envision what you said, maybe for a different role, but that's my understanding of the situation from a quick standpoint.
Something that I thought of immediately, I don't know how it works in other countries, but I think Belgium is really good with, the right to get accommodations when it comes to mental physical disabilities and when they are not granted or when they are refused. So I know Belgium is very strong in that. There is, it's taken up in the law. Again, I'm not from a law background at all, but I've researched it a lot. So I read into it, and I know that, if, for example, if you request a reasonable accommodation because of a disability and it's not granted to you, students can actually turn to, legal advice and like a legal case. It's not like I say that you need to sue every professor. We can also go into a dialogue, of course. And maybe sometimes it also, or what I believe, it also just ties a little bit into discrimination, because that person doesn't have the same capabilities as other students, and you're discriminating that person based on they should be able to do everything that other students do. So it also ties into discrimination. And then what we also enforce, and I think that's also a lot of institutions have that as well, is a code of conduct. So certain behaviors that we don't allow on our campus grounds, and students can come through an internal mechanism that can help overcome such cases, such as discrimination or bullying, or so that's also something that students can rely on, and that is also communicated to them, that there are these mechanisms in place internally or through more legal rights, let's say.
I'm sorry, I just want to finish. Of course, we also have some rights about discrimination in Czech Republic. It's not that they cannot go to sue somebody. Of course, the only problem is that when there is a subtle, support that they may or may not follow. So this is the way what I meant when I said I have legally no point. It's not that we will let our students discriminate.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. And of course, we can continue the conversation in a moment. Thank you for your answers. I think something that clearly came today is that student well-being is not or cannot be treated as just an additional service, because it is much more than that. And it cannot just exist as a standalone activity or support, but this is also something more holistic in terms of systematic approach on how we create universities as a safe space that supports the well-being and in the end also supports the success of the students. And the student well-being is connected to participation, belonging and inclusion and academic success. And it's not only about removing all difficulties or challenges, but it is about creating a space that makes students feel supported, seen, that they can contribute and participate, and that they just have university as the safe space without any fear of stigma or discrimination. So with that being said, I wanted to say thank you to our speakers for sharing all the insights and also your perspectives and your experiences, the best practices, and for all your continuous work on supporting students. This is very much appreciated, and I just hope that we can take your best practices and implement it across different institutions, not only universities, and that we can see more and more people like you that make students at the center of the university. Thank you to everyone that participated for also being here, contributing your time after work to also hear about students and wanting to learn about how to support students. And also, of course, thank you to CZELO for inviting us to co-organize this event. It is also a very important topic for us as ESN, and we just hope that we can continue working towards making the students' health and well-being more important and also better supported. So with that being said, we invite you to now some small tapas, a drink, and also we can continue the conversation informally. So thank you very much.